In 2015, as the militant group known as ISIS swept across Syria and Iraq, they engaged in a highly publicized campaign of cultural destruction. Videos broadcast globally showed militants using sledgehammers and explosives to obliterate ancient statues, temples, and artifacts in cities like Palmyra and Nimrud, denouncing them as idolatrous. This performative destruction, however, masked a more systematic and lucrative operation occurring simultaneously. While the large, immovable monuments were destroyed for propaganda, the smaller, transportable artifacts, cylinder seals, cuneiform tablets, coins, and statuary were being systematically looted from archaeological sites and funneled into the global underground market for stolen antiquities. The looting of antiquities is not a modern phenomenon, but the industrial scale at which it occurred in conflict zones in the Middle East over the past 2 decades revealed the mechanics of a sophisticated, multinational shadow economy that connects impoverished looters in war zones to wealthy private collectors in London, New York, and Geneva. The supply chain of stolen antiquities operates through a layered, compartmentalized network designed to obscure the origin of the artifact and protect the ultimate buyer. At the base of the chain are the looters on the ground, often local residents operating out of economic desperation or organized groups working under the protection or direct control of militant organizations. In territories controlled by ISIS, the group essentially institutionalized the looting, issuing licenses to local digging crews and taking a percentage of the profits, a tax known as the comes, effectively turning the region's cultural heritage into a revenue stream to fund their military operations. Once an artifact is extracted from the ground, it enters a pipeline controlled by regional smugglers. These middlemen move the artifacts across porous borders into neighboring countries, Turkey, Lebanon, or Jordan, which serve as transit hubs. Here, the artifacts are stockpiled, and the process of laundering their history begins. The critical bottleneck in the illicit antiquities trade is not acquiring the artifact, but acquiring the paperwork necessary to sell it on the legitimate market. An ancient Mesopotamian tablet is worth relatively little if a dealer cannot prove it was acquired legally before international conventions prohibiting the export of cultural property went into effect. To solve this, the network employs professional launderers and corrupt dealers. They create forged export documents, falsify ownership histories, known as provenance, and sometimes route the artifact through countries with lax customs enforcement or specialized free ports like those in Geneva, where luxury goods can be stored securely and anonymously outside normal customs jurisdictions. A common laundering technique involves claiming that a newly looted artifact has actually been sitting in an anonymous Swiss private collection since the 1960s, supported by forged letters or receipts. Once the paperwork is fabricated, the artifact is introduced to the legitimate, or semi-legitimate, art market. It may appear in the catalog of a reputable auction house, or be offered for sale by a high-end gallery in a major Western city. At this stage, the artifact has been cleaned. The buyer, whether a private collector or even sometimes a museum, can purchase the object with the plausible deniability provided by the forged provenance, choosing not to look too closely at the obvious gaps in its history. The profitability of this trade relies on the willful blindness of the demand side. The end buyers are almost exclusively located in wealthy Western nations or emerging economic powers. They are motivated by the prestige of owning ancient artifacts, the aesthetic appeal of the objects, or the perception of antiquities as a stable financial investment. This demand creates the economic incentive that drives the looters at the other end of the chain. The consequences of this underground market extend far beyond the financial enrichment of militant groups and criminal syndicates. When an archaeological site is looted by untrained diggers using bulldozers or pickaxes in search of marketable objects, the context of the artifacts is permanently destroyed. Archaeology is essentially a destructive science. A site can only be excavated once. The value of an artifact to human knowledge lies not just in the object itself, but in its precise location in the ground, its relationship to other objects, and the stratigraphy of the soil around it. This context allows archaeologists to reconstruct how people lived, what they believed, and how their societies functioned. When a site is looted, the objects are ripped from this context. A cuneiform tablet that might have provided crucial insight into ancient trade networks, if excavated properly, becomes, when looted and sold on the black market, merely an isolated, decontextualized object of art. The destruction of the archaeological record is absolute and irreversible. Law enforcement efforts to combat the illicit antiquities trade have achieved significant successes in recent years, including the repatriation of thousands of stolen artifacts to their countries of origin and the prosecution of several high-profile dealers and smugglers. However, the market continues to thrive, driven by the immense disparity in wealth between the source countries and the market countries, and the enduring human desire to own a piece of the ancient past, regardless of the cost to the historical record or the criminal networks funded by the purchase.